إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. أما بعد فإن خير الكلام كلام الله وخير الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار. We begin by praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We praise Him, we seek His aid and assistance, and we beg His forgiveness. We seek refuge with Allah from the evils of our own souls and the consequences of our sins. Whomever Allah guides aright, none can misguide, and whomever Allah leaves to stray, none can guide aright. I testify that none deserves worship but Allah alone without partner, and I testify that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Allah's final messenger and His most devout and sincere worshipper. The best speech is the speech of Allah Ta'ala, and the best guidance is the guidance of Muhammad alayhi salatu wassalam. And the worst of all things are those that are newly introduced into the religion. Everything newly introduced into the religion is a bid'ah, an innovation, and every innovation in religion is misguidance, and misguidance leads to the fire. Today we continue reading through chapters and sections on the subject of the rules, regulations and etiquette of marriage and wedding in Islam, taken from the book Afnanun Nadiyya of Shaykh Zayd Al-Madkhali Hafizahullah Ta'ala. And this book, as we mentioned, is a commentary on the subject of fiqh, the rules and regulations and details of the rules and regulations in Islam, prayer, fasting, and so on. And this section, or we've been reading through this section on marriage for the benefit of both brothers and sisters, and particularly for the class directed towards the sisters. In the previous class, we started looking at huquq az-zawjah, or the rights that the wife has upon her husband, the things that the husband must take care of, or the matters that the husband must make sure he is fulfilling and is taking care of with regards to his wife or wives. And in the previous class we looked at the first haqq, or the first right, which was al-ishratu bil-ma'ruf, or to live with her and to treat her in a good, fair and just manner, ma'ruf. And we explained the meaning of that in the previous class, and we mentioned what the author, the Shaykh Hafizahullah, quoted from some of the texts in the Quran and Sunnah, which prove that it is incumbent, it is wajib upon a husband to live and to treat his wife in a ma'ruf fashion, meaning that he treats her and he lives with her in a good way without being unjust to her and without wronging her, but rather he has to treat her well. Today we come on to look at a couple of the other rights that have been mentioned in the book and the Sunnah, and which the ulama, the scholars, have derived from the Quran and Sunnah as being the correct behavior and correct kind of attitude that a man should have towards his wife. And then we'll move on, inshallah ta'ala, to talk about the rights of the husband upon the wife. So the second thing mentioned here, al-haqq al-thani, the second right that the wife has upon her husband is as-sabr alayha, is that the man must be patient in his dealings with her. So it is upon the husband to be patient and persevering, to have sabr upon his wife. And this includes advising and commanding her to do what is right with patience, and reprimanding her from any sins or wrong deeds and wrong actions that she does with patience, and not to assign to her or not to give her duties or chores which are beyond her means, and which and not to demand too much of her. And also it includes, as the Sheikh mentions, turning a blind eye to some of the deficiencies and slip-ups that may occur from her, like a bad word that comes out of her mouth, or not. Sometimes she slips up, she's not respectful, she does something wrong, she says something wrong. So it's also a part of the sabr, the patience that a husband has to have, that he should turn a blind eye, and he should let her off and not remind her of her slip-ups and her mistakes all the time, such that he makes life difficult for her. And this is all part of the sabr, patience. And from this description, we can understand that the meaning of sabr, the meaning of patience with regards to one's wife, does not mean that a person leaves her to do what she wants and doesn't care and doesn't concern himself with trying to make sure that his wife remains obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and stays away from disobedience to Allah Azza wa Jal. Rather, as we've seen in the list of points that have just been mentioned, part of being patient with one's wife is being patient in commanding her and telling her and teaching her to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and being patient in az-zajr, or reprimanding her and disciplining her if she disobeys Allah, and to help her to stay away from the disobedience of Allah Azza wa Jal. This is the greatest thing that a man can do for his wife. And likewise, it includes, as we said, at the same time, being patient in the sense that one does not take her to account for every mistake or every slip-up that she makes between himself and herself, meaning that if she says something which may not be the best thing to say to the husband, if she personally offends him or makes a mistake or makes a slip-up, and it's not something which is something that she needs to be reprimanded of there and then it is also part of patience that a man doesn't take her to account for every mistake that she makes. And this is all taken from the fact that patience, as-sabr, is something that we've been commanded with in Islam, and we have been praised, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has praised those who are patient and has promised a great reward for those who are patient. And patience in all of our affairs, including one's dealings with one's family, one's relatives and one's wife, brings about good results. And it carries with it a promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that Allah Azza wa Jal will be with the person who is patient. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with the patient. As the Shaykh mentions, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, وَاصْبِرُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. وَاصْبِرُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الصَّابِرِينَ. In Surah Al-Anfal, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to be patient. He said, وَاصْبِرُوا, have patience, be patient. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after commanding us to be patient, tells us the result and the reward and the good results for upholding this patience. He said, Azza wa Jal, Inna Allaha ma'a sabirin. Verily Allah is with the patient. So the promise of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He will be with a person who is patient, which means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will support him and aid him and take care of him and help him and protect him. And so this is the type of being with a person, which means, which is special and specific to those who obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and those who love Allah Azza wa Jal, and those who fear Him, and therefore they do what He's commanded and stay away from what He's forbidden. The believers who establish this characteristic and this virtue of patience, then they have this promise from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He will be with them, in the sense that He will aid them and assist them, and He will protect them, and He will guide them. And so every Muslim, man or woman, has this promise from Allah Azza wa Jal that if they're patient, then they have this support from Allah Azza wa Jal. And this also includes the husband being patient upon his or with his wife or wives. And likewise, this concept or this idea that we need to be patient with the wife is also taken from the hadith that was mentioned in the previous class. At the end of the hadith, when the Prophet ﷺ told us that the woman was created from the rib, and the rib is bent, and so if the hadith mentions, if you try to straighten it, you will break it. If you try to straighten the rib, which by its nature is bent, if you try to straighten it, you will break it. And so the Shaykh mentions that this is also one of the reasons why a person needs to be patient, because there will always be some kind of deficiency, some kind of slip up or mistake that might come from the wife. And that being the case, a person needs to be patient. Otherwise, if he tries to straighten out every small problem, every small slip up that she makes, he's going to end up breaking her. She won't be able to take it. And as some of the ahadith mention, and as the ulama mentioned, the meaning of breaking the rib here is divorce. You'll end up having to divorce the wife. The marriage will come to an end. And so this is part of the attitude of an intelligent man, an intelligent person, is the one who knows when he should try to teach and correct and reprimand or tell off his wife, and when he should let her off and ignore her small mistakes and her the small slip-ups that she might make. And as we said, examples of these small or reoccurring mistakes are sometimes the wife will respond or say something that is not right, or which is not correct. It's not respectful towards her husband. It's not the correct manners towards her husband. You can't take her to account for every single word that she says. And likewise, it involves not doing what many women actually do to their husbands or to their families or to the people that they know, and that is not saving or keeping a record of all her mistakes and then reminding her every chance you get of the mistakes that she's made or the problems that she's done. This is actually the way of the weak women who have a deficiency in their iman. It is often the characteristic of these wives and these women that they remind their husbands especially and others of everything that they regard as being negative or bad, and they keep this mental record of everything that you've done which is wrong, and then when she gets angry or when she gets into an argument, she brings it all out and she tells the husband, well, you did this and you did that and you said this and you said that, and suddenly her memory becomes very good. Her memory becomes almost photographic. So the husband is required not to be like this. He shouldn't be like this, because if you do this, then of course you'll have so much negative feeling and so much negativity between yourself and your wife, and you won't be able to correct it. You won't be able to straighten things out without breaking her. So this is also part of the patience. And we emphasize that patience with one's wife, therefore, does not mean to let her do everything she wants, or to ignore her completely, or to have no say and have no input into the education and tarbiyah, cultivation of one's wife upon the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and helping her to stay away from the disobedience of Allah. Rather, this is part of one's patience, that despite the deficiency in her character, despite the deficiency in her aql, her way of thinking, a person, a husband, will have the patience to continue trying to teach his wife, to try to encourage her, help her, and tell her to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and to keep on trying to help her to stay away from sin and to stay away from disobedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though you're going to experience some difficulty, some hardship, or some resistance in this regard. And this is one of the principles of being successful as a human being, that not only do you know the truth and you strive to know the truth, but you practice it, and you have to be patient in practicing it, and not only that, you have to call to it. And not only call to it, but be patient in calling to it. And this, as we know, is that these principles are taken from the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. By time, verily mankind is in a state of loss. They are all losers, except those who believe. They know the truth, they believe the truth, and then they act upon it by doing righteous deeds. They put it into practice, and not only that, they call others to the truth. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ. They call others, they advise others, and they they instruct each other to stick to the truth. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. And they counsel each other and advise each other to be patient upon this truth and to be patient upon this call to the truth. So just as a person who involves himself in da'wah, in calling to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in calling to Islam, needs patience, because he's going to meet some resistance, or he's going to meet some kind of problem that people will not always appreciate what he's doing, or people will disagree with him, or people will maybe even try to harm him because of the truth that he calls to. So in the same way, that this patience is required in doing da'wah, in calling others to Islam and calling others to the Sunnah, the first person or the first people who deserve to have this da'wah, to have this call to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala directed towards them, is a person's family, person's parents and his relatives, including his wife and his children. Those are the first priority for da'wah. And if they are the first priority for da'wah, then likewise they are the ones that we also need to be patient with. And this is a point that we must remind ourselves, and we must think about or consider and judge ourselves regarding this point. You find some people, some men, some brothers, are very enthusiastic and are very involved in what they regard as being da'wah, calling to Islam, calling to the Sunnah, whether that be in the form of giving lectures or going out and calling other people to Islam, or being involved in the Masjid and being involved in the organization of da'wah activities and so on and so forth. And at the same time, they are negligent of their own families, and they don't teach their own families, and they don't pass on knowledge, and they don't organize for their own families to be educated upon Islam. And this is a wrong, or this is a lack of having the correct priorities and having the correct kind of attitude. The first people who deserve a person's patience and a person's attention are his family, whether that be one's parents or one's relatives, whether that be the wife or the children. Those who are closer to you in relation have the most right upon you with regards to your nasiha, your advice, and your sincerity towards them, and your patience with them in these matters. So that's the second haqq or right that the wife has upon the husband, is that he should be patient with her. He should not be quick to give up on her or to dismiss her or to be angry with her and so on. Rather, he should be patient in those things that we've just mentioned. The third thing which is mentioned here as being one of the rights of the wife, and here in this section of the book, you'll notice that the Shaykh concentrates on some of the rights and some of the duties that are to do with a person's attitude and his behavior towards his wife. Of course, there is the essential and practical rights that the wife has of being provided for in terms of food and shelter and clothing, and these have been mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ and have been mentioned by the ulama as rights that a person's wife has upon her husband, is that since you have taken this woman in marriage and you keep her as one who you are in charge of and who you protect, one of your essential duties is that you provide for her what she needs. You provide to the best of your ability. You provide for her in terms of feeding her, and in terms of clothing her, and in terms of sheltering her and giving her a place to live in safety and in a way that she can practice her religion and she can worship her Lord and she can remain obedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the third thing mentioned here is above and beyond that. The Shaykh mentions the third haqq that the wife has upon her husband is al-ihsan ilayha, is benevolence, kindness, and doing good towards her. And this comes, as I said, after the mention of living with her upon ma'ruf. As we said, the first right that was listed was that a man must live with his wife upon ma'ruf, in a good way. And that is by fulfilling his obligations towards her and by keeping her from harm and not being a cause of harm to her. Above and beyond that also, this is another right, and that is one of al-ihsan, benevolence and kindness. That he should, above and beyond living with her in a good way, he should actually treat her well and go out of his way to be good towards his wife, to have ihsan. And he should do this, the Shaykh mentions, as much as he can, according to his ability, according to what he can do. And this, the Shaykh said, is only because of the great and beneficial effects and results that being benevolent towards your family has. And this carries great benefits and good results. And the people who have the most right upon you, as we just said, with regards to your ihsan, your benevolence, and your kindness and your generosity, are your family, your relatives, your mother and father, your blood relations, and your wife and your children. The more close a person is to you in terms of their relationship and their family ties, then the more haqq, the more right they have upon you, that you should treat them well and that you should behave with them in the Islamic manner, and that you should have ihsan, that you should be good, benevolent, kind and generous to them. And again, this is an area for us to check ourselves and to think about our behavior and our attitude. Again, many people are very kind, and they spend a lot of time, and they enjoy a lot of time, and they make things very pleasant for their friends and for the people outside of their family. But when it comes to their families and their relatives, you find that they have, they don't have so much time, and they don't pay so much attention to their families and their relatives. And this is the opposite of what should be the case. And that is that your family have the most right upon you, and thereafter you do good, and you are kind, and you make things nice for every other Muslim around you. But the first people who deserve this from you are your family, your parents and your relatives, your uncles, your aunts, anyone who's a relative to you that you have around you, and also, of course, your wife and your children. And so the Shaykh mentions that when a person's wife feels and experiences ihsan, benevolence and kindness from her husband, then this has a great effect and makes married life pleasant and safe and good. And in this kind of environment, the spouses and the children can flourish in their Islam, and they can grow and develop as worshippers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, remain obedient to Allah Azza wa Jal in a safe and in a pleasant and secure environment. And so, again, the intelligent person is a person who will pay attention to this aspect of his married and family life. And the Shaykh mentions that the wife, in turn, if she experiences and if she's treated in this good way, then she herself will, by herself, return the good treatment and strive to live and to be pleasant towards her husband and to fulfill his rights upon her, and she will learn from his good behavior and take a good example, and also feel closer and more connected towards her husband because of his good treatment of her. So the Shaykh said then at the end of this section, وَأَمَّا بِأَيِّ شَيْءٍ يَكُونُ الْإِحْسَانِ فَإِنَّهُ يَكُونُ بِلِينِ الْقَوْلِ وَحُسْنِ الْخِطَابِ وَالْمَوْعِظَةِ الْحَسَنَةِ كما يكون بالعمل من الإعانة المادية والهدي المحبب إلى النفوس ونحو ذلك من سبل الإحسان. So the Shaykh said, as for the kinds of things through which ihsan is realized and actualized, then they include in one's speech, by speaking and addressing her in a good and soft and gentle manner, and exhorting her when one needs to exhort and to remind his wife, exhorting her in a beautiful and good manner. Likewise, this ihsan, this benevolence, is achieved through one's actions and one's deeds, through helping her in financially, helping her physically with the things that she needs and the things that benefit her, and giving her, gifts and presents and things which are going to cause or increase the love between the spouses, and likewise any other type of behavior and attitude and action which could be regarded as ihsan, benevolence and kind treatment. So these are some of the hukuk, these are some of the rights that the wife has upon her husband. And so the husband should consider and should think carefully and should always check himself to see if he is fulfilling these rights which are, with regards to him, his duties. And so, being good, or living in a good and kind manner towards one's wife, is from the duties, wajibat, that are upon a husband. These are not matters which are extra, or things that you do when you feel like it. Rather, a person has to have patience. A person has to have patience in doing these things, even when a person is not in a good mood, or a person has been offended by his wife, or a person is angry with his wife for personal reasons. Even if that is the case, it is upon the husband to remain fair and just, and to be good towards his wife, which may include also calling her back to the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and exhorting her and addressing her. But even when a person does that, he should do that in a good way, in a way that will bring about benefits. And this is because the family life, as well as being a blessing, a ni'mah, a blessing from Allah Azza wa Jal, having a wife or wives and having children is a blessing from Allah Azza wa Jal, for which we should be grateful to Allah Azza wa Jal. And gratitude to Allah with regards to our families is that part of this gratitude is that we should treat them in the way that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala approves of, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded us, and in a way that pleases Allah Azza wa Jal. And at the same time, it's a fitna, it's a trial and a test. The Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam said in the authentic hadith in Sahih Muslim, he said, I have not left behind me, or I have not left after me, a fitna more harmful upon men than women. I have not left after me a fitna more harmful or harder upon men than women. And so the fitna, the test that a person may go through with regards to women, is shadid, is harsh and hard and difficult to deal with sometimes as a test. And this includes one's wife. This includes one's wife. When the ulama, when the scholars, for example, Imam al-Nawawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, when he explains this hadith in Sahih Muslim, in his commentary on Sahih Muslim, he includes within this a person's wife. It doesn't mean, some people when they hear the words women and fitna, they only think about one aspect of this fitna. And they automatically seem to think that this only refers to the fitna in terms of falling into fahisha, falling into zina, seeing what you should not see, and so on, of strange women, women who are not your family, women who you don't have any relationship with. But this is one aspect of the fitna of women. Another aspect of the fitna of the women is the fitna of one's wife. The test and the trial of being patient upon her and enduring the harm and enduring the difficulties that a person faces in his married life. And this itself is a test. Are you going to, treat the wife in the correct manner? Do you have enough patience to continue living with your wife in a correct manner upon the obedience of Allah Azza wa Jal? Or do you fall when it gets difficult and when it gets, when you hear things and you see things from your wife that do not make you happy, or that cause arguments or problems between you, or the demands that the women have with regards to the wealth that they want, or the things of the worldly things that they require or that they want, then this is also a fitna, a test and a trial for a person. A person may, as we said, be one of those kind of people who doesn't care how materialistic his wife is. He always provides for her. He gives her anything she wants, and he will sometimes enter into haram. He will sometimes try to get money or to get belongings and to get wealth even in a haram way, even in a sinful and forbidden way, in order to provide for his family. And this is a fitna. This is him failing the fitna of the family, because the wife always has demands. The wife, usually, the women have demands, and they want things. And they want things whether they need them or they don't need them. And so the test upon a man is he able to give and to spend upon his family in a way that is pleasing to Allah Azza wa Jal, and that does not involve disobeying Allah Azza wa Jal? Or is he the kind of person who just gives anything his family wants, he tries to get from them by hook or by crook? And so this is all part of the fitna of women. So the Prophet ﷺ said, I have not left a fitna after me more harmful upon the men than the women. And this includes one's family. It includes the wife, it includes the daughter, it includes, sisters, whatever it may be. This is a fitna for you as a man, and you need to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with regards to this test, this fitna, this trial. So those are some of the huquq, the rights of the woman, the wife. Now the Shaykh mentions some of the huquq, the rights of the husband upon the wife. And so the attention is turned, and the women, the sisters, the wives to be should pay attention. In the first section, the attention for the men, the brothers, need to pay attention. And they need to think about whether they're fulfilling their duties. In this section, the wife, the woman, the sister needs to think about the duties upon her. And in brief, the haqq, the right and the position that the husband has with regards to his wife is a great position. It's an immense and a very serious position. And there is no way to express it better than what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in the book, in the Quran, and what the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself said. And we can sum it up perhaps in the words, or in the meaning of the words of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he once asked one of his sahabiyat, one of the female companions, he asked her if she was married. To which she replied, she was. And so he said to her, how are you towards your husband? How are you towards him? And she replied that she tried to do everything she could to fulfill his rights. She tried her utmost to always, treat her husband as he should be treated. And he said to her, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said to her, be careful how you are towards him. Be careful and see and check yourself and see how you are towards him. فَإِنَّهُ جَنَّتُكِ أَوْ نَارُكِ. فَإِنَّهُ جَنَّتُكِ أَوْ نَارُكِ. For indeed, he is your Jannah and he is your fire. He is your Jannah and he is your hell. Meaning that depending on how you treat your husband, depending on how you are towards your husband, you will either enter paradise, Jannah, or you will enter the fire. And so this shows us that the haqq, the right, and the manzilah, the status that the husband holds, the Muslim husband holds towards or with regards to his wife, is a very important and an immense status and right. And in fact, he has, of all the people who are alive, he has the most right upon his wife. So upon a married woman, the one who has the most right and the one she must obey the most out of all other people from her family or anyone else is her husband. He has the most right over her after Allah Azza wa Jal himself. So, one of the rights that the husband has upon his wife is the right of obedience, at-ta'ah, which means that the wife is required to obey her husband in everything that he tells her to do, whether it be with regards to herself or financial matters, his wealth, his household, his family, and so on. So it is not allowed for her also, one of the things that are mentioned here by the Shaykh is that the wife is not allowed to refuse giving herself to her husband when he wants to be with her. When he wants to have relations with her, it is not allowed for her to refuse. This is one of the basic rights. And this is a right through which she benefits, as well as her husband, as well as the society. Because one of the, as we all know, one of the maqasid, one of the objectives behind marriage is to help to keep the believers chaste and to keep them away from fahisha, to keep them away from zina, or to keep them away from those things that lead to az-zina and al-fahisha. And so, following on from this great maqsad, this great objective of marriage, is the fact that if the husband wants to have relations with his wife, then she is not permitted to refuse him unless she has a shar'i, a legal, Islamic, legitimate reason for not, responding to his needs. And there are many ahadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in this regard. And so the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, for example, in the hadith reported by Abu Hurairah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, and recorded in Sahih al-Bukhari and other collections of hadith, Sahih Muslim as well. He said, alayhi salatu wassalam, إذا دعا الرجل امرأته إلى فراشه فأبت عليه لعنتها الملائكة حتى تصبح. If a man calls his wife to his bed and she refuses, then the angels curse her until the morning. The angels curse her until the morning. And in another wording in Sahih Muslim, the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam said, إذا باتت المرأة هاجرت فراش زوجها لعنتها الملائكة حتى تصبح. If a woman spends the night abandoning and staying away from the bed of her husband, then the angels curse her until the morning, until she awakes, or until the morning. So these ahadith and others prove that one of the hukuk, one of the rights of the husband upon his wife, is that he should be able to fulfill his needs as a husband in a halal way with his wife. And it is not for the wife to refuse because she's angry or she's upset or she's, for whatever reason, unless she has a good Islamic reason whereby she cannot or she is not able to respond to this aspect of married life, because, for example, she has an illness or a sickness or a problem that will cause her harm if she has normal relations with her husband at that time. And so in that case, of course, the husband must be understanding and must know that, or must know the situation, and he must know the condition of his wife, such that, he understands that at this time she is not able to respond, and she is not disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and she is not disobeying her husband, but she is not able to meet or to respond to this need. And of course, it is the wife who benefits from this haqq, actually, as well as the husband, because this helps to keep the women chaste, and it also helps to increase the strength of the relationship and the love and the appreciation between the spouses. And so this helps also to keep the husband happy with his family life and with his wife. The greatness or the seriousness of the haqq, this right that the husband has upon his wife, is also highlighted in the fact that, based upon the Quran and the Sunnah, based upon what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed in the ayat, in the verses of the Quran, and based upon the hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it is known that between the spouses, between the husband and the wife, the man can approach his wife in any way and at any time he wishes, except for those specific things that have been forbidden, which are mentioned in the hadith and which are mentioned in the legal texts in the books of fiqh and the books of Islamic law and jurisprudence. For example, certain times where the man is not allowed to have relations with his wife. For example, when she's on her menses, or when they're in the state of ihram, or there are certain sifat, certain ways, or certain descriptions, or certain types of sexual relations which are not allowed, which are mentioned in the books of fiqh. So apart from the exceptions which are proven in the book and in the Sunnah, then the husband has the right to have relations with his wife at any time and in whatever way he so pleases. And if the husband demands of his wife, or he wants to have relations with his wife at a time or in a way which is haram, and the wife refuses, then she is obeying Allah Azza wa Jal in this case, and she is not sinful. Rather, she is to be rewarded, and she deserves to be rewarded and to be appreciated for not allowing herself or her husband to disobey Allah Azza wa Jal. So that's the exception, or it's a situation which should not be confused with the right of the husband. The right of Allah Azza wa Jal, and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has commanded, and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden, takes precedence in all affairs. In fact, the wife obeys her husband, and she tries to fulfill his desires to the best of her ability as part of her obedience to Allah Azza wa Jal. But if that means then that she will involve herself or allow her husband to be involved in something forbidden, then of course she is right to refuse, and in fact it is not allowed for her to obey her husband in that situation. It is not allowed for her to have relations with her husband if it involves the ma'asiyah, disobedience to Allah Azza wa Jal, either because of the time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has forbidden these relations in, or the way and the particular way or the mode in which the relations might happen. If this is forbidden, then of course the wife not only shouldn't obey her husband, but she mustn't obey her husband, and she has the right to refuse. And she, in that case, is doing good to herself, and she is doing good to her husband, because she is helping to keep herself away from sin, and also helping her husband to stay away from sin. And in that case, she is not regarded as a bad wife or as a bad person or as someone who's disobedient. Rather, she is regarded as being righteous and correct in what she's doing. And she is praised for this. The Shaykh mentions the hadith here, which really shows the manzila, the status that the husband has with regards to his wife. And this is a hadith reported in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, and on the authority of Anas ibn Malik radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, لا يصلح لبشر أن يسجد لبشر ولو صلح لبشر أن يسجد لبشر لأمرت المرأة أن تسجد لزوجها من عظم حقه عليها والذي نفسي بيده لو كان من قدمه إلى مفرق رأسه قرحة تنبجس بالقيح والصديد ثم استقبلته تلحسه ما أدت حقه. This hadith is difficult to translate because of the serious or the very heavy message within it. The Prophet ﷺ said, as Anas ibn Malik reports, he said, it is not right for any person to prostrate to any other person. Of course, this is the right of Allah Azza wa Jal, and this is an ibadah. A sajda, bowing down and prostrating, is an act of worship that needs to be directed only to Allah Azza wa Jal exclusively. And to bow down to anyone and to make sajda to anyone apart from Allah Azza wa Jal is an act of shirk, associating partners with Allah Azza wa Jal. And it was done, and it is done to this day in some societies and cultures. In some societies and cultures, to show respect to another person, a person is expected or required to bow down towards that person or to even make sajda in front of them. And this is done to this day in some cultures. In some countries and in some cultures, in order to show one's respect and obedience towards elders in the family, parents or uncles or aunts and so on. To this day, there are whole countries and whole cultures where the younger person will make sajda in front of the elder. So this is forbidden. Or they will bow down to each other, and this is forbidden. So the Prophet ﷺ said, it is not right, it is not correct for any bashar, for any human, any person, to bow down to another bashar, to another human, to another person. But then he said, وَلَوْ صَلُحَ لِبَشَرٍ أَنْ يَسْجُدَ لِبَشَرٍ لَأَمَرْتُ الْمَرْأَةَ أَنْ تَسْجُدَ لِزَوْجِهَا مِنْ عِظَمِ حَقِّهِ عَلَيْهَا. He said, but if it was okay, if it was right for any person, for any human being to bow down to another human being, I would have commanded the wife to bow down or to make sajda, to prostrate to her husband, because of the idam, because of the greatness and the seriousness of his haqq, his right and his status upon her. So here, this is an example of the kind of hypothetical situations that are mentioned in the book and in the sunnah to emphasize a point. To emphasize a point. Of course, the Prophet ﷺ, it is impossible that the Prophet ﷺ would ever command a person to bow down to another person and to prostrate to another person. This is impossible. So here, in order to explain the immenseness of the situation and to make a point, the Prophet ﷺ said, if it was all right, and this if, we know when the Prophet ﷺ mentioned these words and these statements, this is wahi, this is revelation from Allah Azza wa Jal. So he said, if it was ever okay or it was ever right for any person to bow down or to prostrate, to make sajda to any other person, I would have commanded the wife, the woman, to prostrate to her husband because of the great, the azim, the great and serious right he has upon her. And then he said, sallallahu alayhi wasallam, in the same hadith, وَالَّذِي نَفْسِي بِيَدِهِ, I swear by the one in whose hand is my nafs, my soul, my life. لَوْ كَانَ مِنْ قَدَمِهِ إِلَى مِفْرَقِ رَأْسِهِ قُرْحَةً تَنْبَجِسُ بِالْقَيْحِ وَالسَّدِيدِ, I swear by the one in whose hand is my soul. If the man, the husband, this husband, was covered from toe, from his foot to the tip of his head in boils and cuts which were seeping pus, وَاسْتَقْبَلَتْهُ, and his wife turned to him, ثُمَّ اسْتَقْبَلَتْهُ تَلْحَسُهُ مَا أَدَّتْ حَقَّهُ. So if the husband was covered from toe to the tip of his head, or as we would say in English, from head to toe, the other way around. If he was covered from head to toe in qurha, which are like boils or cuts or injuries, which were seeping pus, and his wife turned to him and she licked it all, she would not have fulfilled his right. She would not have fulfilled his right. So this hadith doesn't really need any explanation. And what more can be said about the right of the husband and the status, and what more will make a woman understand the right of the husband upon his wife if the likes of these nusus, if the likes of these ahadith and these statements of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam do not have an effect, and if they don't make you understand the right that your husband has upon you. If after this you don't understand and you don't appreciate and this doesn't affect you, then what can a person do? What can any alim, what can any scholar, what can any sheikh, what can any book, what can any talk, and what can any lecture do after that? So the sheikh said, حفظه الله, وغير هذه النصوص في هذا المعنى كثير، وكلها تدل على مدى عظم حق الزوج على زوجته لما له من الإفضال والرعاية والإنفاق. He said there are many other texts which have the same meaning, which give the same message. All of them prove and show how much or how great the right of the husband is upon his wife because of the care and the benevolence and the spending and the efforts that he makes in looking after his wife. And the opposite of this, our sisters and our wives should remember, the flip side to this is that ingratitude towards the husband is one of the greatest causes for people entering the fire. Yet it is so common and so widespread amongst the women that it will result in the majority of the inhabitants of the fire being women. As the Prophet ﷺ told us, and he told the women when he addressed them and he exhorted them one Eid, he commanded them, he said, "O women," he turned to them and gave them a special sermon, a special maw'idah, a special exhortation after giving the Eid khutbah. He turned to the women and he said, "O women, give in sadaqah, give in charity. For I have seen that most of the people of hell, most of the inhabitants, the denizens of hell are from amongst you, women." And so a woman asked the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, she asked, "Why is that, O Messenger of Allah?" And he said, "Takfurna al-ashir." You are ungrateful to the husband. You deny his benevolence, his kindness, and you are ungrateful towards your husbands. So this is one of the most common reasons why a woman will enter the fire, and we seek refuge with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from this. But one of the most common reasons that a woman will enter the fire is precisely because of having this opposite attitude of being ungrateful, rude, and not fulfilling the haqq, the right of the husband. Whereas obedience and kind treatment towards the husband is one of the easiest ways for the woman to enter Jannah. The Prophet ﷺ said, if a woman prays her prayers and she fasts her fast in Ramadan and obeys her husband, then she can enter into Jannah from any of its gates, from any of its doors that she wishes. So, the intelligent woman, she knows that what is upon her to get to Jannah is that she just has to take care of her family life. She doesn't have to go out and do what the men have to do. She doesn't have to go out and compete and try to be a man. And she will never have to do what the man has to do in society. But what she has to do is to remain obedient to her Lord through her personal ibadah, her worship, establish her prayers, fast the fast, and do the obligations that are upon her, including obeying her husband and staying obedient to him. And if she does that, then she has the promise from Allah Azza wa Jal that not only will she enter Jannah, which is the ultimate success, to gain the pleasure of Allah Azza wa Jal and to look upon the face of Allah in Jannah. Not only that, but she will be honored that she will be able to choose, or she will be able to enter Jannah through any of its gates. She will be able to choose to enter Jannah through any of its gates. This shows the closeness or how much that woman will belong in Jannah. You know, when you have a house, when you have a building, when you have a property, which you have or which you are closely associated with, you don't enter it as a guest. You don't wait to be told where to go. This happens when you go to someone's house and you're a stranger and you have no real relation or connection to that place. But if you are someone who is very well connected to that place and very familiar with the people of that place, and you belong in that place, then there are no formalities, and you go and you enter that house from the front door, from the back door, from any door. And so this woman who remains obedient to Allah Azza wa Jal and fulfills the right of her husband, she will be a person of Jannah, a person who will be able to choose whichever door she wants to go into Jannah. She will be able to go into Jannah. So these are some of the ahadith, some of the narrations which mention the rights of the husband upon the wife. And there are some specific other things which are listed. We'll close today's class with mention of the last one for today and then continue in the next class. One of the rights specifically that she must fulfill with regards to her husband is that she must preserve and look after him, or protect and keep his rights through keeping herself chaste and keeping herself in an honorable situation, position, and also through preserving his house and his property. As proven by the hadith of Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he reports that Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, خير النساء امرأة إذا نظرت إليها سرتك وإذا أمرتها أطاعتك وإذا غبت عنها حفظتك في نفسها ومالك. And this hadith is in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, and the Shaykh mentions that it has many different wordings, and it's a sahih, authentic hadith. The Prophet ﷺ said, the best women, and this is one of the ahadith that explain the sifat, the qualities and the attributes of the best of the women, if you want to be from amongst the best of the women. He said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, khayrun nisa, the best women are those, and he's addressing the man here, the best women are those who, when you look at her, she pleases you. When you look at her, she pleases you. And when you tell her to do something, she obeys you. And when you are absent from her, when you go away, when you're on a journey or you're absent from your house and you're absent from your family, she preserves you, she looks after your right with regards to herself and with regards to your wealth. So there are two things here mentioned with regards to fulfilling the right of the husband indirectly, or when the husband is not there. Of course, it means that this is a right of the husband when he's there and when he's not there. It's something that a woman has to take care of, even if the husband is not there. Because if the husband is there, then of course she has to have the correct attitude and she has to obey him and listen to him. And of course she fulfills his rights. But here there's a reminder that if the husband needs to travel, if he needs to go away from his family because he's working, because he's going out fi sabilillah, or he's busy with something and he's not at home, then the right of the husband remains. And it becomes even more important in these two things. And they are, the first, that the woman takes care to preserve the honor and the right of her husband in terms of how she deals with herself. And she does not allow herself, in the absence of her husband, to do anything haram or to do anything that is going to bring shame upon her and her family and her husband, in terms of allowing herself to be seen by other men or talking to other men, or even worse than that, doing something which is fahisha, something which goes even beyond, something which is unspeakable with regards to the married woman. So this is that she protects her honor and her husband's honor and the right of her husband with regards to herself. And this is contrary to what, subhanallah, many women are like today. Well, I mean, in most Western cultures and in non-Muslim cultures, this is a concept which is basically totally absent. You'll find a woman who's married, and she has, she goes out and about and does everything she wants to do and mixes with whoever she wants to mix with, male friends, female friends, and doing all kinds of things which are unthinkable actually to anyone who is a believer in Allah in the last day. And likewise, the Muslimah is required to preserve herself and to preserve her honor. And so when the husband's absent, she's not someone who, okay, now that the husband's not there, she's going to go about and speak to whoever she likes and go about in mixed environments, or not wear her hijab properly, or speak freely to people who are ajanib, who are strangers with regards to her, who are not her family relations, and so on and so forth. She's going to be even more careful when he's not there, because this is a time where, she's to be trusted. And a man should be able to leave his house and trust that his wife is going to take care of herself with regards to her honor and with regards to his honor, as well as his property. And that's the second thing which is mentioned, is his property, his mal, his wealth, his money and his property and the things that he owns. That she is required to be responsible with regards to his wealth, so that she does not spend or allow for his wealth to be spent and taken without his permission and without his knowledge and without his approval. Some wives, some people, some women demand a lot from their husbands with regards to spending and money, and I want this and I want that and I need this and I need that. Give me this and give me that. And worse still, if the husband is not around, she cheats her husband and she steals from him, or she takes from him, or she spends his wealth in a way that he would not approve of, but she can get away with it because he's not there. And so this is another right of the husband, that she preserves his wealth and his property and looks after his house and looks after his property, because he is not able to do so. He is gone. He's going and he has something else to do. So part of that right that he has is that you preserve these matters, these two things, oneself, one's honor, one's chastity, as well as the husband's property and his wealth and his belongings. You do not allow it to be wasted, neither by yourself nor anyone else. You do not become negligent of it and allow it to be wasted or stolen or anything like that, but you take care of his property and you take care of his wealth, whether that be protecting it against your own greed and your own desires, or protecting it by not being negligent as to preserving it and keeping it and taking care of it. So these are some of the huquq, some of the rights that are mentioned by nas, by text, in the Quran and in the authentic hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. One or two more things remain to be mentioned in the forthcoming class, and then we will move on in the next sisters class in a fortnight's time to look at the issue of being fair and just between wives when a person has more than one wife, and some of the ahkam, rules and regulations governing al-qisma or al-qism, or dividing one's time and resources justly between the wives. When a person is in a polygynous marriage, he has more than one wife. And as a reminder, before we close, next week's class, because of some of the other activities taking place, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, next week's class on Kitab al-Kaba'ir, on the Book of Major Sins, will be at, I believe, 6 o'clock GMT. So next week's class will be later. It will be at 6 o'clock just for next week, and then we'll move back to the normal time. bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. أقول هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم والله تعالى أعلم وصلى الله وسلم على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.